The radio crackled to life at 3:47 in the morning. Marcus Thompson's hands gripped the steering wheel of the ambulance as he raced through Portland's empty streets. Rain hammering against the windshield like bullets of desperation. Burnside Bridge emergency. Possible jumper. Time critical. His partner Jake checked equipment in the back while Marcus pushed the engine harder than he should have. 6 years as an EMT had taught him that 3 minutes could mean the difference between saving a life and carrying a body. The bridge appeared through the storm like a steel monument to human suffering. Marcus parked and grabbed his kit, boots splashing through puddles as he ran toward the cluster of police cars. But even from 50 yards away, he could see the unnatural stillness of the figure lying on the concrete below. The fall had already happened. He was 3 minutes too late. The victim was 26 years old. The officer told him, "Officer, no identification," but someone had heard him make a phone call before jumping. Marcus knelt beside the body anyway, checking for signs of life that weren't there. In the silence between raindrops, he heard something that would haunt him for months. A voice message playing from a cracked phone nearby. The words were barely audible, but they burned into his memory like acid. "Tell my dad I forgive him." 6 months later, Marcus stared at the eviction notice taped to his apartment door in Alberta Arts District. The address was familiar. This was gentrification territory, where families with roots deeper than the city's history were being erased by developers with more money than mercy. His own story wasn't much different. After David's death in a car accident, he'd adopted Sophie, David's 8-year-old daughter who hadn't spoken a word since the funeral. Between his PTSD from failed emergency calls and the crushing weight of single parenthood, EMT work had become impossible. The classified ad in Willamette Week seemed too good to be real. Private driver position, $90,000 annually, Sterling Estate in West Hills. Marcus had passed those mansions before. Gothic monuments to old Portland money that looked down on the rest of the city like disapproving ancestors. The interview was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon at a house that seemed to swallow sunlight. William Sterling answered the door himself, which surprised Marcus. 58 years old, silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. But it was his eyes that caught attention. Slate gray and carrying the same weight Marcus saw in his own mirror every morning. The weight of someone who'd failed to save what mattered most. Arthur, the elderly butler who appeared behind William, had the gentle bearing of someone who'd spent decades managing other people's pain. He led Marcus through halls lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, past rooms draped in white sheets like ghosts of lives when there once lived. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something that might never come. William stood facing windows that overlooked the gray sprawl of Portland, his back rigid with the kind of control that comes from years of forcing feelings into submission. When he turned, Marcus caught his breath. There was something familiar about this man, something that made his chest tighten with recognition he couldn't quite place. "You need this job," William said. It wasn't a question. His voice had the quality of someone who hadn't used it for a conversation in months, rough around the edges like unused machinery. "I need someone who won't ask questions. Arthur will explain the duties." Marcus thought about Sophie, who set an extra place at their tiny kitchen table every night for David. He thought about the eviction notice and the empty refrigerator and the way his daughter's shoulders hunched when she walked through their crumbling neighborhood. He nodded. Sometimes the jobs nobody wants become the ones that change everything. Sometimes a stranger's pain calls to your own across a crowded room full of careful silences. And sometimes, if you're very unlucky or very blessed, accepting of her help means walking straight into the heart of your own unfinished story. Life has a way of connecting the dots we never saw coming. Have you ever taken a job that changed everything about who you thought you were? Share your story with Heart Stories, where every voice matters and every journey deserves to be heard. The morning routine never varied, and variation, Marcus learned, was William Sterling's greatest enemy. 8:30 sharp meant pulling the Blacktown car around to the mansion's front entrance, where William would emerge with the precision of clockwork, his face a mask of composure that never cracked. He would slide into the back seat without acknowledgement, placing a folded piece of paper beside Marcus with the day's destinations written in elegant script. First stop was always OHSU Hospital, where William would sit motionless in the parking lot for exactly 30 minutes, staring at the psychiatric wing like a man trying to solve an equation written in a language he didn't understand. Marcus watched in the rearview mirror as William's knuckles went white gripping his briefcase. Watched the way his breathing would catch when ambulances wailed past them with their cargo of crisis. The second stop took them downtown to Tonkon Torp Law Firm, where William would disappear inside glass towers that reflected Portland's changing skyline. These meetings always left him with red-rimmed eyes and the careful walk of someone carrying invisible weight. Marcus began to understand that whatever business William conducted here, it was the kind that required tissues and closed doors. But it was the third stop that revealed the true nature of William's pilgrimage, Burnside Bridge, where he would stand at the exact center span for 30 minutes, arms wrapped around himself like he was trying to hold something together that had already shattered. Marcus had driven past this spot countless times as an EMT, but now it felt different. Now it felt personal in a way that made his stomach clench with memory. The fourth stop was Sterling Development Offices, where William would sign papers with the efficiency of someone running from something, never staying longer than necessary to conduct whatever business kept his real estate empire functioning. But Marcus noticed how William avoided the conference rooms, how he took service elevators to avoid eye contact with employees, how he moved through his own company like a ghost haunting a life he no longer recognized. Sophie changed everything, the way children always do when they stumble into adult spaces carrying true growth adults have forgotten how to see. She was sick again, or pretending to be, which had become her way of avoiding a world that felt too big without David in it. Marcus had no choice but to bring her along for William's afternoon rounds. Sophie sat in the front seat with her sketchbook, golden hair falling like a curtain around her face as she drew what she observed. She hadn't spoken since David's funeral, but her pictures told stories that words couldn't capture. At Burnside Bridge, while William stood in his usual spot, Sophie drew something that made Marcus's breath catch. An angel with broken wings and the words, "Someone was very sad here," written in her careful 8-year-old handwriting. When William returned to the car and saw the drawing, something flickered across his face. Not anger, but a pain so raw that Marcus almost looked away. "How did she know?" William asked quietly, and it was the first personal question he had ever spoken aloud. "Kids see what adults try to hide." Marcus replied, "They haven't learned to pretend yet." The breakthrough came during one of Portland's famous winter storms, when rain turned the city into a watercolor painting and forced them to wait in the car while thunder rolled over the bridge like the city's own grief made audible. Marcus had always been good at reading silences, but this one felt different. It felt like an invitation. "Do you ever just want to talk?" Marcus asked, the words escaping before he could stop them. "About whatever brings you here every day." William was quiet for so long that Marcus began to compose an apology. Then, barely audible over the rain, came the response that would change both their lives. "I had a son. His name was James. He died 6 months ago on this bridge." Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis. 6 months ago, the same night he'd failed to reach the jumper in time. The same voice that had whispered forgiveness into a broken phone. But he couldn't process that connection yet, couldn't voice the terrible coincidence that was beginning to take shape in his mind. Instead, he shared his own story about David, about the car accident that had stolen his partner and left him raising a daughter who communicated only through pictures, about the weight of being responsible for someone else's healing when your own felt impossible. Neither grief nor love comes with instruction manuals, but sitting in that car while rain drummed overhead, two strangers discovered something that therapists charge hundreds of dollars to facilitate. They discovered that pain shared doesn't magically disappear, but it does become bearable. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it becomes the foundation for something resembling hope. Arthur had been watching from mansion windows, noting how William's shoulders seemed less rigid after these drives, how Marcus handled silence like someone who understood its weight. The old butler had spent 40 years reading William's moods, and he recognized the signs of someone beginning to remember what human connection felt like. That evening, Arthur left coffee for Marcus with a note written in careful script. Some silences are meant to be broken. Thank you for having the courage to speak first. Healing doesn't follow timelines, and connection doesn't wait for permission. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones carrying their own pieces of the same shattered story. Sophie's wisdom came in pictures before it came in words. And the picture she drew that day would later hang in the James Sterling Memorial Center as a reminder of how children see true truth adults work their entire lives to avoid. She drew two men with golden cracks running through their silhouettes, standing on a bridge that connected broken ground. When she showed it to William and Marcus, she wrote beneath it in careful letters, "Broken people can fix each other." The concept came from Kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing pottery with gold, making the cracks part of the object's beauty rather than something to hide. Marcus had bought the supplies at Powell's Books, where the art section neighbored memoirs about identity and belonging. He didn't know that James Sterling had spent hours in those same aisles, reading stories of other young men trying to find their place in families that couldn't make room for who they really were. But the golden repair work would have to wait. Portland's legal system doesn't pause for personal healing, and Sterling Development was facing the largest class action lawsuit in the city's recent history. 37 families from Alberta Arts District, mostly Latino immigrants with roots deeper than the Pearl District's oldest buildings, were suing for discriminatory displacement practices. Their lawyers had documented a pattern of predatory behavior targeting families least likely to fight back. Marcus found himself caught in the center of this storm when a legal aid knocked on his apartment door with a subpoena. His testimony would be crucial, they explained, because he'd witnessed firsthand how Sterling Development operated, how William Sterling made decisions that prioritized profit over people. The irony wasn't lost on him that the man paying his salary was the same one destroying his neighbors' lives. The courthouse confrontation happened in a hallway that smelled of industrial cleaner and decades of legal battles. William cornered Marcus during a recess, his composure finally cracking like ice under pressure. "You're destroying everything I've built," he said, his voice raw with betrayal. Marcus looked at this man who'd become something complicated in his life. Not quite friend, but more than employer, and felt his own anger rise. "You destroyed families first. James would be ashamed of what you've become." The words hung between them like a physical blow. William's face went white, then red with fury. "Don't talk about my son. You don't know anything about loss." But loss was exactly what connected them. And Arthur had been watching both men circle around this truth for weeks. During a brief recess, the elderly butler approached Marcus with information that would shatter both their worlds completely. He'd overheard Marcus talking to EMT dispatch about schedule changes, and that voice, combined with details William had shared about James's death, painted a picture that made terrible sense. "You were there that night," Arthur said quietly. "You were the one who tried to save him." The recognition hit Marcus like physical violence. The timing, the location, the voice message that had played on loop in his nightmares for months. William's son was the young man he'd failed to reach in time, the voice that had whispered forgiveness into the darkness of Burnside Bridge. Sophie, who had been sitting quietly during the courthouse drama, chose that moment to speak her first words since David's death. Looking directly at William, she said, "James wants his daddy to help other kids." The legal consequences were swift and merciless. The court ruled against Sterling Development, ordering financial reparations that threatened to bankrupt the company. William faced potential criminal charges for housing discrimination. His real estate empire, built over 3 decades of careful calculation, began crumbling like sandcastles at high tide. Marcus realized his testimony had contributed to William's destruction, but he couldn't regret standing up for families who had no voice against corporate power. Justice and forgiveness rarely arrive at the same time, and sometimes doing the right thing means watching someone you care about face consequences for choices they made long before you knew their name. In the courthouse parking lot, as lawyers shuffled papers and families hugged their children closer, Marcus and William stood facing each other across a divide that seemed unbridgeable. They were connected by loss, separated by justice, bound together by a truth that neither had been ready to face. The intersection of personal pain and social responsibility creates impossible choices. Sometimes protecting the vulnerable means confronting those we've learned to care about, even when caring complicates everything else. The recording had been sitting in William's desk drawer for 6 months, a digital file he played obsessively but had never shared with another human being. It was the audio from James's final phone call, captured by the 911 system and obtained through legal channels that had cost more than most people's annual salaries. When William finally played it for Marcus, the voice that emerged from the speakers was young, frightened, but strangely peaceful. "Tell my dad I forgive him," James had said into the darkness of Burnside Bridge. "I know he tried to love me the way he could, but I can't keep trying to be someone I'm not. Tell him that being gay isn't something I chose, but forgiving him is." Marcus recognized the voice immediately. It was the same message that had played from a cracked phone screen 6 months ago. The words that had haunted his dreams and turned every emergency call into a reminder of his failure. But hearing it now, in William's study with Arthur standing silently nearby, he understood something he'd missed that night in the rain. James hadn't died because Marcus was 3 minutes late. James had died because of years of accumulated shame and rejection. Because love conditional on hiding your true self isn't really love at all. William's initial reaction when James came out had been predictable and devastating. Denial, anger, demands that his son see therapists who would fix what wasn't broken. William had genuinely believed he was protecting James from a world that wouldn't understand. But protection that requires someone to disappear isn't protection, it's erasure. Arthur chose this moment to share his own 40-year secret, the burden he'd carried through decades of faithful service. He had been William's father's partner, a relationship hidden so deeply that even William hadn't known until now. For 40 years, Arthur had watched William make the same mistakes his father had made, building walls instead of bridges, choosing reputation over relationship. "William, you became your father," Arthur said quietly. James needed acceptance, not empire building. Marcus tried to save him from the bridge, but you can still save others from needing to jump. The transformation began that day, but not with grand gestures or public apologies. William started by dropping all legal defenses against the class action lawsuit, instructing his lawyers to negotiate fair settlements rather than fighting displaced families in court. He began attending community meetings in Alberta Arts District, listening to stories of families his company's policies had harmed. Marcus helped design new emergency response protocols that treated mental health crises with the same urgency as physical trauma. They developed training programs for EMTs and paramedics about LGBTQ youth suicide prevention, using James's story as a case study in how family rejection contributes to mental health emergencies. Sophie's breakthrough came gradually. Then all at once, she began speaking in whispers, then sentences, then entire conversations about David and James and the way people leave, but their love doesn't have to leave with them. Her artwork evolved too, incorporating golden lines into portraits of families that looked nothing like traditional nuclear units, but everything like chosen families built from love rather than biology. The James Sterling Foundation launched 6 months after the courthouse confrontation, funded entirely by liquidating William's personal assets rather than company money. The foundation partnered with Outside In, Pride Northwest, and Q Center Portland to create comprehensive support systems for LGBTQ youth in crisis. Marcus became a crisis counselor. William learned to monitor hotlines, and Arthur finally lived openly for the first time in 4 decades. Their first save was a 17-year-old trans girl who called the hotline from a different bridge on a different rainy night. Marcus responded personally, and for the first time since James's death, he arrived with enough time to matter. He talked about James, about fathers who love imperfectly, about young people whose pain is temporary, even when it feels permanent. Later, reviewing the call logs, Marcus found that William had been the one to initially answer the phone, had kept the girl talking until the emergency responders arrived. In William's careful handwriting, The call notes read, reminded her that someone was waiting for her to come home. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing harmful behavior. It's about refusing to let past pain prevent future healing, both for ourselves and for others who share our struggles. The dedication ceremony took place on a June morning when Portland's skyline seemed to shimmer with possibility. The kind of day that made residents remember why they tolerated 9 months of rain for 3 months of perfection. The James Sterling Bridge Crisis Prevention Station was the first LGBTQ-specific suicide prevention installation in Oregon, featuring emergency phones connected directly to trained counselors in Sophie's art installation, a golden telephone sculpture that seemed to connect earth and sky. Marcus stood at the podium feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes, but also the lighter weight of Sophie's hand in his and William's steady presence beside him. Behind them, the crowd included Alberta Arts District families, Q Center members, city council representatives, and teenagers who might not be alive without the Foundation's intervention programs. James couldn't stay with us, Sophie said into the microphone, her voice clear and strong. But he taught us how to help other people stay. My dad Marcus says that some people leave so others can learn how to catch people before they fall. The memorial wasn't just about James anymore. The golden plaque included names of other young people who had been saved by crisis interventions, reminders that healing multiplies when pain transforms into purpose. William read each name aloud, his voice steady with newfound purpose rather than breaking with old grief. Arthur cut the ribbon with shaking hands, finally able to live openly after 4 decades of hiding. Behind him stood Marcus and William, 2 men who had found family in the aftermath of individual tragedies, proof that chosen families form in the most unexpected places. Alberta Arts District had become a model for inclusive development, with Sterling Development leading community-centered housing initiatives rather than displacement projects. Other Portland neighborhoods were requesting similar partnerships, creating ripple effects that extended far beyond any single family's story. Sophie released golden origami cranes into the Willamette River, while Marcus and William watched from Burnside Bridge, each crane carrying the name of someone saved by the Foundation's crisis line. The current carried them downstream toward the Columbia River, toward the Pacific Ocean, toward destinations unknown but somehow hopeful. The final call report of the day showed 17 interventions, 3 hospitalizations that prevented attempts, and 42 follow-up calls to people building support networks. William monitoring phones in his mansion's former ballroom, now converted to crisis center space. Marcus responding to emergencies with protocols designed to save rather than just react. That evening, as Portland's lights reflected off the river like scattered gold, Marcus found William standing on their bridge looking not backward toward loss, but forward toward tomorrow's possibilities. Sophie sat between them, drawing their reflection in the water. 3 figures connected by golden lines that showed their cracks and celebrated their repairs. Have you ever found family in the most unexpected places, built from shared loss rather than shared blood? Sometimes our greatest pain becomes our greatest gift to others who walk similar paths. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Subscribe to Heart Stories for more real stories about resilience, chosen family, and the power of turning our wounds into wisdom. Every story shared creates connections that save lives.